Members of the public are welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Licensing Committee. Do we have any apologies, please?
Apologies tonight, Chairman, received from Councillor Wilson at the moment. I do believe Councillor Dale is en route. I've not heard from Councillor Blanksby as yet.
Right. Thank you. We will proceed, however, we'll see how things go.
We haven't been too calendar. Have we got some remote?
Two different ones, isn't it?
Sorry? No, she's not, sorry, but how many of them? Fine.
Yep.
Six.
It's the evening after the first hearing, isn't she? I can't hear the next one because I conflict.
Hmm.
So it's good 2 hours. 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 9 of us.
There's 9 of you.
There's 9 of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking that.
Sorry, members of the
Sorry.
public, minor deliberations about whether we are about to be quorate or not on a later application. That I think has now been satisfactorily resolved. So we'll go back to the main agenda. We've had apologies. Could I have a proposal that the minutes from the 14th of March are accepted, please? Thank you. Just noted. Thank you very much. Item 3, any declarations of interest, members? Councillor Andrew Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 6C, 2022/1236. I know the applicants socially, so I will not take any part in the debate or vote on that item.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are you going to leave the room as well? That's being debated. Yeah.
Councillor Paul. Sorry. Yeah.
Do you want me to leave the room?
Yeah, sorry, can we
Right.
just go back? No, it's just what sort of interest you have really. So you know them, it's just, you just know them. It's not,
Socially,
there's no, pecuniary interest. No,
no.
Okay, that's fine.
Councillor Paul Brown.
I declare an interest in the Ryehall planning application. We are family related with the. Sorry. I declare an interest in the Ryehall application. We have a family involved with the applicant, and that is a very close connection. So therefore, I will be withdrawing.
Thank you very much. Any other declarations? Okay, thank you. Petitions and deputations, apart from those specific to the 2 applications, there are none. And then under item 5, you will see that the licensing application for the kiosk at Rutland Water, which is itemised in this report, is deferred to the special meeting on the 27th. I think members are aware of that, but there was a slight ambiguity that the printed information was there. Before I move to item 6, we have 4 long-standing members of the committee, Mr. Dale, who isn't here at the moment, and 3 others who have contributed an enormous amount to the deliberations of this committee. I would like to give my personal thanks to Councillors Cross, Bull and Gordon Brown, who have again given unstintingly of their time and in particular their experience. That is something that you can't measure, but is immensely valuable to the shaping of the planning of the county. And I'm sure those of us who might or might not be returning would wish them very well and thank them for that. So thank you very much indeed. Councillor Cross.
Oh dear. It has actually been a great pleasure to serve on this committee because I believe it does an awful lot of good and it tempers the applications that we have seen and what have you. And I trust that residents will have appreciated the amount of work that you yourself put in over the years and members of staff as well do to protect our little corner of England. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for those comments, and I entirely endorse what you said about the officers. Yeah. Right, we now move then to planning applications, item 6. And the first one is the Cottesmore one. So we're over to Mr. Thrower to present the report. We'll have a brief presentation and then take you through these.
Thank you, Chairman. The application before you this evening is a proposal in full for the construction of 93 dwellings to the north of the village of Cottesmore. You can see the application site is outlined in red on the plan on the main screen there. The scheme does include provision of some public open space, which is the land to the west of the western third of that application site. Just to take the aerial view of the village, as the previous plan, the application site is located with the residential development in this field here, with public open space extending out into the agricultural land to the west there. This road that you can see down the left-hand side of the screen there is the road between Market Overton and Cottesmore. This is the proposed layout plan. As you can see, the access is taken from Mill Lane here, opposite the existing car park to the primary school, with that main central road leading through into the development with 2 loops taken off it and various other private driveways serving individual properties around the edges of the development. There is a balancing pond at the southeast corner of the site. This has been designed to be a sort of a beneficial feature of the development. Has a footpath for residents coming around the site as well, and is landscaped as part of the proposals. This plan shows the currently proposed materials of development on the land. This is subject to a condition on the recommendation. However, this is I've included this plan to sort of give an indication as to the currently proposed format of the materials on site. These purplish pink properties outlined here and this section here would be in reconstituted limestone to reflect the predominant feature of the village, and then the remainder of the properties in a red brick, again chosen to sort of reflect the elements of red brick that are present within Cottesmore. We've got some indicative plans of the types of properties that are included within the site. There's over 22 different house types, so I'm not going to take you through all of them. This, as you can see, is a typical bungalow proposed on the development. Then we've got semi-detached dwellings, and then up all the way up to sort of detached 5-bedroom dwellings. And there are a couple of examples of 3-story development as well, with dormers within the roof space, which is a feature traditional to Cottesmore. Just taking you through some photographs of the site and its surroundings. This is taken from Mill Lane at the Market Overton Road end, looking back towards the site. You can see the church spire here, and then the development that forms the existing western edge of Cottesmore is located in here. As always with pictures of this nature, they do skew the view somewhat, and when you're actually stood there, you can see those buildings on the edge of Cottesmore far clearer than is shown in these pictures. The field off to the left is the agricultural field that would form in part, or part of which would form the public open space and landscaping of that western edge of the development. Closer in, you can see a better view of the existing western edge of Cottesmore here. and the school buildings are off to the right-hand side of that picture. This is the agricultural field that would then become public open space. And this view is taken from the entrance to the site, looking back to the west, back over that area of public open space. This then is the immediate land adjoining the access to the site, where the proposals would include the provision of play equipment for residents of the village. And this is the proposed access point into the development. Similar view taken from the east of that land. The access point would be in here. And then this is a view taken looking up that access with the existing housing in Cotsmore off to the right, and their field over to the left. Further views within the development site, it's sort of an unremarkable field at the moment, fairly flat. And as you can see, the existing boundary of the field adjoins and forms the existing plan limits of development of the village. Just finally then a view through one of the existing developments along Mill Lane. This is the Lilac Farm development that was undertaken in the early to mid 2000s. It currently serves, I think, 6 or 7 properties off this private driveway, with the sort of the view of that drive leading out into the countryside beyond. The proposal does allow for bungalows on the other side of this development to match up with the bungalows that are located at the end of Lilac Farm, so as not to cause an unacceptable amenity relationship. The policies that are relevant to the scheme, they're all set out in the report for you, but we've listed them here just for clarity. And then the main issues in relation to the proposal. In terms of the principle of the application, the site is located beyond but adjacent to the plan limits of development of the village. The location is considered to be sustainable, however, and the proposal would make a significant contribution towards the maintenance of the 5-year housing land supply. It is worth noting that this site was originally included in the 2017 draft local plan prior to the consideration of St George's Barracks and then the withdrawal of that plan. It is also a site that would meet with the requirements of the interim housing statement should the local authority not be able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. That argument is considered in the main report at section 5 under principle of development as to whether or not we can demonstrate that land supply at this point in time. Impacts on the character. The residential development itself will obviously have an impact on the character of the settlement. There is, however, also to consider the open space to the west of the site with the landscaping of that land, and officers consider that overall the benefits of that landscaping, sufficiently counter the impact of the building on that land. In terms of amenity, officers have looked at the relationships between the proposed development and the existing dwellings adjoining it, and as noted in the presentation earlier, considered that those relationships are acceptable. With regard to heritage, there is only one outstanding heritage matter in relation to the proposal. There is a further condition in the addendum report before you this evening, just to undertake some additional archaeological survey work following the initial work that was undertaken by the applicant prior to putting the application in. In terms of its impact on the conservation area and listed buildings, officers consider the scheme is acceptable. The proposal is accompanied by documentation to demonstrate that it achieves the required biodiversity net gain. And again, the maintenance and provision of that biodiversity net gain is to be incorporated within a Section 106 agreement that is currently being prepared in relation to the scheme. Highways impacts, as we've noted in the main report, the Highways Authority have confirmed they have no objections to the scheme following a number of discussions that were undertaken during the lifetime of the application. Amendments have been made by the agent at the request of the Highways Authority to ensure that they're now satisfied. Levels of the site, as you saw from the photographs, the site is relatively level anyway, but we have received floor level plans from the applicant demonstrating that the level of the finished dwellings will be proportionate to the existing properties adjoining the land, and therefore we don't have any concerns with respect to overlooking as a result of differences in land levels. Noise and dust, the construction management plan condition would address those matters. That is set out in the main report. And the actual development proposals themselves are not of a use that would be likely to result in unacceptable effects on those grounds. As I mentioned earlier, a legal agreement is currently being prepared between the applicant and the local authority in relation to developer contributions towards the site. And we've listed there the main heads of terms as to what that legal agreement relates to, and incorporates affordable housing, open space, the provision of the play equipment, travel plan mitigation, and the biodiversity proposals. It's concluded, therefore, that the application before you this evening is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions as set out in the main report and supplemented by those in the addendum report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pratt. Right, we have various people to speak. Could I ask Tracy Chadwick to come forward, please? You have 3 minutes to present and 3 minutes for members to ask questions. So when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so good evening, members of the Planning Committee. I'm here today to voice objections on behalf of the vast majority of the local community. The location of the site causes concerns regarding parking and safety. I understand that Highways recommended the site entrance needed to be moved following their assessment in November 22. The entrance to the site remains in the same place. Residents and parents have expressed great concerns regarding safety should this site be approved. I understand that Highways have recommended parking restrictions to be implemented on a section of the road directly opposite the entrance to the development to help mitigate this. However, it is fair to say and reasonable to assume that people will still park as a drop and go in this area based on that this currently happens regardless of there already being signs telling people not to park there. The further concern is the parking around the site. I noted back in November 22, Highways highlighted that parking did not meet policies set out in the NPPF, as it had been based on the number of bedrooms rather than the number of rooms in the properties. The developers have made amendments to this, but what this has led to is parking being squeezed in. It is common around the development for parking to consist of a single garage, with the additional parking being single file behind the garage. For busy families with 3 cars, this would lead to 3 cars being in line and very impractical. What this will then do is this will lead and encourage people to park either using the 13 spaces, which has been there to mitigate the congestion on Mill Lane, or it will lead to people using on-road parking around the development. This means that the site will become hazardous with parked cars and also cause issues for refuge collection. I also know there's been no allocation for visitor parking. Again, this is just concerning as well, that the area in the red brick around the side here doesn't actually contain any footpaths, and this increases safety for pedestrians, which is against planning policy as developments need to provide safe routes for cyclists and pedestrians. A further concern regarding the design of the site is an area where a garage, which is GB 15 in the top right-hand corner on plot 88 and 89, appears to be shared but has no dividing wall. However, if the garage then does, because it's unclear on the plans where this garage belongs to one of the properties, this then means the neighbour of the other house has to park in front of that garage, causing blocking in problems, a severe design fault. There is also a leap, which is designed for young children, and the purpose behind a leap is so that young children aged around 7 or 8 can go and gain their independence by playing independently. As a mother of a 7-year-old myself, I would not be happy with the location of the leap, as it is separate from the site in a separate field. It's by a busy main road and it's on the outskirts of the village. Plus, there is a pond right by there, and that is where the natural spring is at the moment. So I'm assuming the pond is there due to the natural spring. For me, that just wouldn't be safe for my child and I wouldn't feel happy. Therefore, that leap does not fit the purpose it is intended to. It's also located 50 metres away from the nearest property, which is further than the standard site in the RCC site and allocations property of 10 metres. We talk about the SUDs, or the area for the drainage. This is located closer to the affordable homes than the actual leap. So families which were attracted to the affordable homes, children may find the SUDS area being a more attractive place to play rather than the leap. And this only has a very small fencing around the leap. Okay, again, that causes me concern. Absolutely. Yep, I've literally got 2 more things to say. Yeah, very short. And then just previous planning has been refused on Lilac Way due to impact on countryside views from Mill Lane. The proposed site will impact on this view, and this was submitted in my objections showing the splay and the views that will be impacted. So in summary, I believe the planning application should be rejected, as on the grounds there are serious design and safety concerns, and therefore it does not bring a benefit to the village, the community or its residents.
Thank you very much.
you.
Members, you have 3, if you'd like to stay there for the moment.
Too keen.
You have 3 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much indeed.
No problem.
Lovely presentation there. The obviously the dangers of children being attracted to water is great. And we will find out as to what safety measures may be instigated around that area.
Mm-hmm.
I also take note about the left-hand area and the layout of the site, and I think you've actually sort of brought my attention to the fact that the open area could have been more centralized and what have you. But thank you very much indeed.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross.
Thank you, Chair. If the issues that you've raised were addressed, would you be happy for there to be a development there?
So yeah, I appreciate there needs to be development within Cottesmore. We absolutely appreciate that. However, it's around the location being directly opposite a primary school where the traffic is busy, and actually the design around the centre as well, just to me doesn't seem like there's been much thought into the design of it and for development. But absolutely acknowledge that there does need to be development and housing. It's about being, though, the right development in the right location for me.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon Brown.
Chairman, thank you. Again, I'd like to congratulate you on a very clear presentation.
Thank you.
For that. You mentioned about a garage
Yes.
that would have 3 cars parked in front of it. Could you identify on the plan where that might be, so I can just
Absolutely.
check it with the,
Yeah, there's several. I mean, can I get up and point?
yeah, please
to
do.
that? Is that okay?
Don't mind, yeah. Is that all right, Chairman?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's quite common for example, here are 2 houses, and these are garages, and then this is your driveway parking. So you have a car here to park car. It's a narrow,
Right.
and that is commonplace here. It is also commonplace here. It's here as well. And then the main issue in design is here, where this is the garage. Have no dividing walls, that's a double garage with 2 big houses. And then the only way to park here is going to be blocking in this garage.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Any
all,
other
Chairman. Thank you.
members? Time for another question if anybody? No, in that case, thank you very much
No
indeed.
problem. Thank you for your time, everybody.
And I have Chris Donovan from the Parish Council. Thank you. Same applies, Mr. Donovan. 3 minutes and 3 minutes questions. Thank you.
That's right. Okay, thank you members very much for inviting me to come and talk to you on behalf of the Parish Council and of course the residents of Cottesmore. To state the obvious, this is a very large development in the context of Cottesmore. With 93 dwellings, it's likely to increase the population of the village part of the parish by around 20%. The Cottesmore Neighbourhood Plan reflects that we understand and accept that as one of the larger villages in the county, it could and should accommodate some growth. Policy H8 of that plan deals with this by accepting there would be likely some windfall development up to 2026 in line with Rutland's own development plan strategy. The position beyond 2026, we assume, will be reviewed in the light of the next adopted local plan. It goes on to set out the criteria by which any future development would be assessed, including emphasis on using previously developed land and that in general development should not be greater than 20 dwellings. Clearly, this development is therefore contrary to the neighbourhood plan in principle as well as in detail. Furthermore, it is wrong to suggest, as the officer report seems to, that there is no allocation for new dwellings, just that they will come from windfalls and not from extending the plan limits of development. Your officer's report clearly indicates that the proposed development site is outside the plan limits of development in an area of open countryside and that it's contrary to policies of both your development plan and the Cottesmore Neighbourhood Plan. It implies, therefore, that this development would normally be recommended for refusal. This site has a checkered history for Cottesmore residents. It first appeared with 60 dwellings suggested in the 2017 draft local plan. I emphasise first appeared as it was never actually included in the call for sites. Contrary to what your report implies, we consider it was not included in the 2020 plan for issues around housing land supply, but rather was a direct response to the scale of objection from the local community, one of the largest parts of objection to sites in that plan. Turning to the neighbourhood plan's other policies, it does deliver, we acknowledge, a significant number of both affordable housing and 2 to 3 bedroom dwellings. However, that still leaves 31% of dwellings which are larger, and we would contend in this location would put strains on local infrastructure, is unnecessary, and will also put increased vehicle movements at what we consider to be a very dangerous and unsafe location. It is suggested that the character of the entrance to the village along Mill Lane from the northwest will be improved by the provision of 93 new dwellings, because to some extent they will be screened by the landscaping area to the west of the vehicle entrance. Suggesting that the character and appearance of any village approach is enhanced by 93 new dwellings and some artificial landscaping, rather than naturally occurring green fields and open countryside, is surely a little misleading. The proposed recreational facilities are often only offered as our requirement to meet the needs of the development, and they are also a long way from much of the rest of the village where they're suggested they are a bonus for the village in its entirety. And as you can see from the plan, are quite a long way for young children to go from parts of this site. Turning to the latest review of the local plan, the applicant's site is included within the call for sites submission with a suggested housing designation. No surprise there. Right, yeah, I've got 2 quick points to make. Also included in the site is the landscaping one, the site at the western end, suggesting that a phase 2 could come through at any time. Finally, I would just like to say that the Parish Council fully endorses the justifiable concerns of local residents and users of St Nicholas's Primary School that such a scale of development should access the only access be opposite the school, which we consider is actually a very significant road and pedestrian safety hazard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, you have 3 minutes for questions.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chris. I just want to clarify one thing that you said, which struck me as being quite important. You mentioned that you felt the reason for the withdrawal of this site in the last draft local plan was the scale of objection from local residents, rather than the reason being that we had additional provision elsewhere at St George's Barracks.
Yep.
And that was why you felt.
Well,
this
it
was
it
removed.
is certainly, you could certainly put as much an interpretation on that. It was a reflection of the justifiable residents' concerns with this particular site.
Thank you.
Other members, Councillor Payne.
Would I be right in thinking that you don't regard this as organic development of the village?
No, it isn't.
Councillor Beggy.
Thank you. Just three questions, if it's okay. One point that's come across in both deputations is access and being up to the school, which I fully understand. Would this development become less of an issue if that access could be routed elsewhere, further away from the school?
It would certainly be true that an access that didn't come opposite the school would be better than the current proposal. I wouldn't go as far as to say, you know, you would have to show me what the proposal would be. You've got this one in front.
No, I'm just trying to find some way of potential compromise. My second question is, you mentioned pressure on local services, and I'm assuming that means the wider services such as GPs, etc. But coming from a similar sized village, obviously this will have huge benefits for the very local services, such as the pub, social club, garage and shop, where certainly in Greetham, they are struggling due to the lack of business. So therefore, would it not be providing a benefit for your local businesses?
I think the concern there is that it comes back to the factors like the scale of the development. I was very clear that we are not against, we acknowledge our role in the settlement hierarchy, and we accept that we would expect to see new development. This seems to us to be far too large a development. And although it will bring, you know, certain, but we know there will be still benefits. Obviously, it is always balancing that act. So in that sense, it is too big and in the wrong place.
So potentially a smaller development with a different access would be more acceptable.
Depends how small and where. It is difficult.
No, I'm just trying to understand how much leeway there is in your.
I mean, I think I could answer that in the sense that we say quite clearly in our neighbourhood plan that we would expect developments to be up to about 20 dwellings. So if a proposal came forward somewhere for 20 dwellings, from the parish's point of view, I'm not talking about residents, they would have to have a chance to look at it, then theoretically it might be more in line, but we're here talking about 93.
No, I get that. And my third question is falls off the back of that. Again, based on some previous applications we've looked at, and you say there with the neighbourhood plan, the scope for development with Windfall and previously developed land. From what I know of Cottesmore, there is not a huge amount of potential for Windfall or previously developed land. I'm just trying to see where the route for growth potentially could be.
Yeah, but that I think is one of the, when I first came up here, I was quite surprised when I looked at the designation of planned limits of development, because I assumed there would be some element of development built into those drawings. So I do accept that that is a challenge for all villages. But of course, our neighbourhood plan is looking over a period of time, as your local plan is. So you cannot, you can't be sure where you're going to be in the future. But we have had housing developments, some succeeded, some not, on smaller sites within the plan limits of development over the last few years, and just before the neighbourhood plan was produced as well.
Fine, thank you very much. We have expended the time. Thank you very much. And I'll now ask the agent, Kirsty Clifton, to come forward, please. Same rules apply.
Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to you as the agent for this application. William Davis Homes is a family-owned developer that prides itself on building high-quality homes across the Midlands through its in-house construction team. The company's standing as a five-star house builder for the past 8 years recognises their reputation for delivering sustainability, craftsmanship, excellent customer service and local employment. William Davis have actively supported the site throughout the evolution of Rutland's local plan, consistently seeking to respond to changing needs and evolving policy, In that respect, as well as offering a variety of market homes, the development will provide 28 affordable homes that offer access for first-time buyers and an opportunity for local people to rent homes, the first to be built in the village for over a decade. Whilst we know the council's view on housing land supply, our view remains consistent with the recent appeal conclusions of the Planning Inspectorate, which are yet to be tested through new evidence. But in any event, recognising the need to secure the most robust 5-year housing land supply position remains key. And until a definitive detailed application is consented, there will be continued doubts, particularly given the reliance on the approval and delivery of major outline applications. This application offers the certainty that homes will be built and demonstrates what benefits that can bring. Progress of the proposals has been shared through 2 public consultation events, including online meetings with immediate neighbours and a face-to-face event held post-COVID restrictions. Feedback has directly influenced the scheme and the inclusion of more bungalows and creation of more community open space at the entrance to the village. It also extends connections to existing and prospective footpaths, provides additional off-road parking for school users, and formalises rear access to existing homes on Sheepdyke. Extensive consultation and additional detailed design information has ensured that statutory consultees are fully supportive of the application and satisfied that the scheme meets their requirements, creating a safe and attractive environment. This is reinforced through road safety audits, improved drainage, and enhanced biodiversity. Materials have also been carefully chosen from a number of design options to maximise the benefits of the scheme. Built development sits within an area that is not safeguarded within the neighbourhood plan and specifically addresses the design and development principles set out within its policies. Similarly, the site is suitable in local policy terms as it adjoins the existing settlement, is within easy reach of local facilities, providing open space and affordable homes, alongside SIL contributions that will be secured by a Section 106 agreement. This application helps to deliver homes that are vitally needed in the local area, whilst also providing a range of additional benefits for the residents of Cottesmore. I hope that you can recognise its important role and support your office's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, Councillor Gordon Brown.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. You talk about high quality buildings.
Yes.
Why are you using cheap building materials, red brick, rather than stone, as laid out in our design guide? And as we've seen tonight, Lilac Way has stone houses all the way up it. Why are you going for cheap housing?
I wouldn't say it's cheap housing. I think we've used quality stone and we've proven certainly William Davis has built in the area and built further afield using the materials that are proposed. Brick certainly is not something, it's something that's of character in the local area. The one thing is that reconstituted stone is within the region of 6 times more expensive than stone. And in order to deliver affordable housing, there is a balancing act. We did look at options for various scenarios.
So basically you paid too much for the land and therefore you have to reduce the quality of the housing. Okay, can I carry on? Where are you on the Section 106 agreement? Have you signed heads of terms with the authority?
We've shared heads of terms with solicitors on behalf of ourselves and on behalf.
And you'll sign by when?
It will be prepared as soon as it's possible.
No, I didn't ask that question. I said, when will you sign?
As soon as it is complete. It is in draft. Apologies, I'm not in the solicitors team, but I understand both solicitors have been instructed and it will be drafted and signed as quickly as possible.
And when will you start on site, assuming you get all the pre-commencement conditions satisfied?
We should be able to start within 6 months, assuming that the work on the archaeology is done in relation to the single trench. That's the additional condition that we have to call in.
Thank you.
Councillor, I'll take Councillor Brown next. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms Clifton. You mentioned first-time buyers.
Yes.
What measures are you going to put in place to ensure first-time buyers do actually get sort of the chance to buy some of your houses?
The Section 106 agreement will include first homes, which is the regime which is adopted on behalf of, and it's supported by the council as well, which is for first-time buyers, and it sets very strict requirements in terms of the cost of homes associated with that and who can access them.
Thank you, Chairman. Must be difficult coming to a planning committee with a speculative application that was put in when we didn't have a 5-year land supply, which we do now. But it strikes me that that public open space to the left of the site there is very much an afterthought on the design of the site, and that was added in order to keep the application moving as quickly as possible, rather than in the best interests of what would be a better development with a more central area of public open space.
I think we've responded actually quite carefully to that. The density of the scheme is no different if we were just to develop on that land on the main site as it was originally. The density is no different. The point that we wanted to add, we did further assessments and we understood in terms of what the requirements were for enhancing biodiversity and the way that you provide for that in a particular location. The other thing that came through from the consultation was the need for a reasonable, I suppose a usable open space, which in one area of the site makes sense from an urban design point of view, from an ecology point of view. It also is in the area that, actually is the entrance to the village, and it's a softening, from our perspective, a softening landscape buffer that's appropriate and sets this sort of stage for the development.
But I think I'm afraid we are well out of time. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you very much indeed. Right, I'm now going to ask Councillor Harvey, and just to explain to members of the public, we've got your two ward members are here, one of whom is a member of the committee, Councillor McCartney, who will take full part in the debate. The object is that both members have the opportunity to put their point of view across. So Councillor Harvey will have 5 minutes now, and should she indicate later in the debate that she might wish to intervene, though not strictly part of the debate and having no voting rights, shall we say she might find a sympathetic chairman. But for the moment, 5 minutes, Councillor Harvey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, members. I'm here today to voice the community opposition to the proposed development at Mill Lane. There are numerous reasons why this development should not be approved. Firstly, the site is located outside the PLD and proposes a large development in open countryside, offering a 69.9% market value mix. This is contrary to planning policies CS4, CS10, CS11, SP6 and SP10. Legal advice was offered at the last planning meeting around applications outside of PLD and the precedent they may set. This application is very similar as it also offers no exceptions to CS4 and SP6. Councillor Donovan has outlined the neighbourhood plan, and this development is contrary to COT EN1, H1, H2, H3, H5, H6 and H8. It is important to consider the impact of the local community and the environment when making decisions that go against these policies. Additionally, the latest LHN for Rutland has now been calculated to be 123 dwellings per annum, compared to the 142 dwellings per annum used in the 31st of December calculation. This means that there is a reduction in just over 100 dwellings required to demonstrate a 5-year housing supply. Officers are therefore confident that the new 5-year supply supplement statement will conclude that the council does have a deliverable 5-year supply as at the 31st of March, and so it is appropriate for decisions to be made on this basis. Whilst there is a need to recognise the importance of an ongoing supply of sites and the need to continue to take a positive approach to appropriate and deliverable applications to maintain this 5-year supply, it does not suggest we throw out our planning policies because a developer may be able to deliver a development. The site allocation report from 2021 shows that the proposed development of 93 houses is above the indicative capacity of 77 dwellings based on the Sheila methodology. According to that same report, St Nicholas Primary School opposite is already above capacity, and there is no capacity at the catchment area GP practices, with any SIL contribution being crucial for health infrastructure to support the increase in population. Whilst SIL will go some way to mitigate the pressures, residents will have to travel for all education and healthcare. The cost of transport for the children will need to be met by Rutland County Council, and this travel is not factored into the development travel plan, which assumes St Nick's will be used. Additionally, the proposed development does not meet the housing mix percentage identified in the SHMA and falls short on several other aspects, including play area concerns, waste management, energy and climate change, and parking. The detailed plans make no reference to waste management. No bin storage details are present. In the bottom left corner of the plans, 9 houses are expected to use a turfed area to the side of number 11 on bin day. Members are aware of the changes to bin collection, including new legislation on recycling and food waste. No provision is made for these on site. This is contrary to the MPPF paragraph 40, the MPPW paragraph 8, CS2, CS19, Design Guidelines 6F and SP15. Energy and climate change is essential to future developments. These plans offer gas central heating and no green energy production, i.e. solar panels. That's contrary to SP1, SP15, CS20, COT EN1 and the Design Guide 5B. The EVCP charging points are only pre-fitted on the market value homes and not the affordable homes, with a few exceptions. This creates inequality. There are also various issues with parking spaces to plots around the site, and the garage specification for the 5 bedrooms houses is incorrect. The built-out area on the bottom curve in front of bungalows 24 and 25 will cause an obstruction to the driveways for 35 and 36 opposite. They will prevent disabled parking from being placed in front of the bungalows if it's required. And lastly, the distance to the village amenities and nearest bus stop is measured using a footpath with a narrow section at the village centre end, which is not passable for wheelchairs or big pushchairs users due to a unique kissing gate. That's contrary to CS1. It is vital to uphold planning policies and ensure that approved developments are appropriate and deliverable and take into account the needs of the local community. These plan design issues and the archaeological conditions added in the addendum report mean that delivery will be delayed and therefore the weight of that consideration is reduced. In conclusion, I urge you to consider the shortcomings in design and that this development is contrary to 8 core strategies, 3 spatial strategies, 7 neighbourhood plan strategies, 3 design guidelines chapters and the National Planning Policy for Waste. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much indeed. If you'd like to stay there for a moment, we'll have 3 minutes, just as any other speaker would be entitled to, if members wish to ask Councillor Harvey anything. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Harvey. The lady agent mentioned that all the consultees were in favour of this development. Do you have a list of these consultees?
I think they didn't offer objections. I think in favour and not offering objections are possibly 2 separate things. I will say that the ICP in their reply confirmed that there was no places there is no capacity in the local GPs and requested SIL money specifically. But the ICB have confirmed there is no capacity at the 3 practices where people could go.
Thank you.
Other members? Fine. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Harvey. We'll now move to the debate itself, and as usual, as conventionally, call on the ward member to open that debate. Councillor McCartney.
Thanks, Chairman. I came with a few notes. I've made an awful lot more since hearing the various deputations. So I apologise if this is a bit patchy because I've got notes all over the place. It strikes me as clumsy. The green open space to me seems an afterthought. And it strikes me as too many houses on that site. and I don't know why. Perhaps as Gordon says, maybe they've overpaid for the site and they need to shoehorn as many as possible. But if shoehorning them in means that bins have to be put in inappropriate places, drives have to be blocked, and parking is in rows in front of garages, and that doesn't strike me as appropriate. As the parish councillor said, Councillor Donovan, Cottesmore does accept the need for growth, and as a service centre, though, it does accept that Cottesmore must have new houses. And I think Cottesmore would be happy to see development and would probably raise fewer objections around the village if that site were laid out differently. And so in some respects, it's a shame that this has come as a full application, and rather than something a little looser and a little more premature. But I would like to see that laid out differently with fewer houses if that was going to be in Cottesmore. I'm thinking about the residents of the houses, existing houses there on the greyed out section at the bottom, who are going to have building sites right on their doorsteps, when the green open space would have been much better as a central feature, and the villagers would have had better access to it. It would have looked less like an afterthought. I don't like the access over an existing ditch. That seems to have vanished, and I don't know where it's gone. All in all, I'm not particularly happy with it. I think the village would be happy with the principle of development, possibly on that site, possibly on others. I think there's simply too many on that site, and it's poorly laid out. Other members?
Other members? Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful to Mr. Thrower who didn't show us the 21 house types. The 3 was enough. I agree with Councillor Brown. It strikes me as Anywhereville, and we're getting a lot of Anywherevilles coming up in front of this committee. I don't like the layout. I can't understand some of this layout. I certainly don't have young children, but I certainly would be terrified if I lived up in the top corner for my kids to go over that far across the road and down by the pond to play there. There's no way I'd allow that. It makes no sense at all. It's a mishmash. And it doesn't hold together. Most of the things that have already been said, so I won't repeat them, but it's not organic development. It doesn't seem to me to fit in with the way that the village looks. And I really feel there is potential for development there, but this doesn't sing to me, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, obviously you're very welcome to listen, but you won't be able to take part in this particular item. Thank you. Councillor Andrew Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I seem to remember reading that there's going to be substantial benefits to the wider community from this development, and I'm struggling to see what those substantial benefits are. And I tend to agree with Councillor McCartney that this needs to go back to the drawing board, I think, with fewer plots and a better layout for our reconsideration, rather than us rushing something through that seems rather poorly designed.
Councillor Beggy.
Thank you, Chair. I had lots of detailed notes, but I don't think actually I really need them. I see this as a speculative application put in when we had no 5-year supply, with significant things thrown in after that to try as a fob really to planning. I think the open space inappropriate, and as I mentioned before, is an afterthought. I think the access is in the wrong place and causing an unneeded safety concern, where with extra cost that could be cited elsewhere. The materials, as my learned friend next to me said, are ignoring the design guides, simply trying to come up with a cheap option as opposed to the right option. The housing is too dense, trying to take too much profit out of that area. So inappropriate for the space. I think the planning is poorly thought out. It's simply an attempt to cash into the position Rutland found itself in, past tense. And as far as material considerations are concerned, well, it's outside the PLD. We argued against a precedent at the last meeting, not dissimilar to this. In fact, this is possibly a larger precedent. It goes against the design guide. There are significant issues with parking, issues with highway safety and footpaths, and layout and density. I can be swayed by other debate, but I think it needs to go back to the drawing board. End of.
Thank you. I've got Mr. Johnson.
Sorry, Chairman, thank you. I just, obviously I can take into account the members' feelings on this. I just wanted to point out a few points that I think would be useful to discuss. I think there's been lots of discussion about the location of the open space to the side of the settlement. I think it's important to say that the scheme has been reviewed by our in-house design officer as well, who was reasonably happy with the approach and the design that had been put forward in terms of style of properties and things like that. I think the location of the open space in that location, and I don't just mean the play area, but also the wider landscaped buffer was put on that side of the development in order to soften the approach into the village. If you have it within the centre of the site, then that will inevitably push some of the housing right onto the edge. Admittedly, it is to some extent on that northern side, but on the approach as you drive down the road, the idea and the applicants, I think, have designed it this way in order to try and soften that approach, as has been said. Some of the wider benefits, obviously, we've talked about providing the housing, the affordable housing, the open space, and enhanced wider open space that the public can enjoy. There's also an additional element of off-street parking opposite the school to, I think, address some of the parking problems that are acknowledged in that area at the moment. So that is to help with that. In terms of our 5-year housing land supply issue, we're aware that we've had the recent challenges, as has been mentioned, an appeal inspector's decision. The policy team are reviewing 5-year housing land supply position as we speak, but we consider that we will have a 5-year housing land supply. But I think it is important to note again that is a rolling supply. So it doesn't mean that once we've got one, we don't have to consider other developments such as this. We do need to consider them on the basis that we need to make sure that we keep that supply ongoing. What it means is that whilst we have one, that it gives us the ability to refuse sites that we consider to be completely inappropriate and to support the ones that we feel are acceptable. Clearly, listening to the debate, I think officers and members have a different opinion to this scheme. One thing that I would have concerns about is this issue about highway safety. Robin, our highway engineer, is here, so can explain that, but we have no objection from highways. And I'm conscious of recent appeal decisions where the experts have said, technical experts have raised no objection on the recent appeal decision, Braunston Road in Oakham, and that related to landscape, where members didn't stand by the opinions of the expert landscape officer, and the committee got costs awarded against it. So I think it would be dangerous to refuse the application on highway safety grounds. The other point that I'd make, just in terms of bin storage and things like that can be conditioned, as could materials, albeit whilst there is evidence, red brick used elsewhere within Cottesmore, and that's why officers feel it would be reasonable. It might be, and I think our design officer would agree with members to some extent, that some more stone throughout the site wouldn't be unreasonable, and I think that was something that we were trying to achieve, but weren't able to agree. But that's all I want to say at this point. Thank you, Chairman.
So I've got Councillor Ball and Councillor Gordon Brown waiting to speak, and then Councillor Cross.
Chairman. Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I have to say, members, that I had major concerns with this proposal at the paper stage and in reading all the documents presented to us. And I have to say, my concerns, they are more so after the deputations we've had this evening. In fact, they have confirmed my concerns. We've heard about the safety to children, and I think they are extremely valid. Children will be children. And I think within this plan, there is a failure to acknowledge the potential danger to the children of residents. And I certainly will not be happy in proposing the plan as it stands. There is valid concern also on parking. Society today is car reliant, and we know with the issues in other villages already. Houses become 2, 3, 4 cars very rapidly as families expand. There is a neighbourhood plan, which is a very powerful document, and it's there for that reason for this committee to take into account the neighbourhood plan. The development is outside the village fence, as we have heard, and in my opinion, and we are allowed an opinion, the design is poor. And in fact, I have grave concerns at the various designs as to the build quality. We've already heard a little bit about that from Councillor Brown. To me, the stone percentage is very low, at best cosmetic, and brick predominates. So in summary, I think, Mr. Chairman, as we have heard, it's too big and it's in the wrong place. Although, to be scrupulously fair to the residents of Cottesmore, they acknowledge that the village should expand. But I think as a committee, we owe it to the residents in the future to pass a development which is fitting of Cottesmore as a village and this county as a whole. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ball. Councillor Gordon Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of very simple questions. I'd like yes, no answers if possible from the officers. Do we have a 5-year housing supply, yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. The policies that were identified, I'm asking these questions in the event that possibly the committee may not approve this and it may go to appeal, and therefore it's important that we have clarity of some of these issues. In the paper, I believe it says that the policies that were identified in the appeal on Bronson Road, in our view, are in fact important policies and therefore, in fact, are protected by the NPPF, and therefore that can then generate a situation where the tilted balance in paragraph 11 2D actually falls into place. Is that correct? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. So in other words, tilted balance is just not an argument in this particular application.
As per the report, in our opinion, no.
I just want that recorded for the minutes. Thank you. The next point I've got is in relation to the neighbourhood plan. And I'm just worried that there's a confusion about the neighbourhood plan, and I'm looking at our legal officer here. But my understanding of neighbourhood plan is that this plan was in fact approved in 2016 and therefore is no longer a protected plan. Also, it did not allocate any sites within that plan, and therefore again, on spatial strategy issues, it would not hold any significant weight. Is that correct? Thank you. Okay, I just want to make that. Yeah. It's one bit clear on spatial strategy issues.
I mean,
It doesn't hold weight.
yeah, I would have to take some advice from our policy colleagues. I can't
Let me
give you
give you
that. You think you know more.
Well, I am a neighbourhood planning champion, so I would suggest it doesn't hold any weight in terms of spatial strategy. However, I do note in the email from planning policy on the documentation that it states in there that the policies of the neighbourhood plan should be taken into account, excluding obviously spatial strategies. And there are some which I'm questioning whether there have been. I'd like some answers after I finished on those. COT H6 requires speeding measurements to take place. I'm wondering whether that took place, and given that the average speed coming into the village was 29.5 miles per hour in the 85th percentile in this particular road on a 20-mile-an-hour road, as I understand it. Is that correct? 20-mile-an-hour road? So it's a 20-mile-an-hour road, 85th percentile is nearly 30 miles an hour, and yet we're not concerned about speed. I also don't notice whether there's any issue in relation to moving the 30-mile-an-hour sign further out the village, so there's a longer lead-in. There was no mention of that in any documents I could see. Is that the case? Okay, so there's been, so in respect of COT H6, there's very little cognizance being taken of that. So I just note that, please. Okay. In COT H3, it does say 35% affordable. And this is a 30% affordable. As far as I'm concerned, this policy on COT H3 is a later policy than the local plan and of the decision by the council back in 2016 to move from 33% to 30%. And therefore the 35% is the number that we should be looking at. And I would like some comments from the officers on that point.
So I'm just thinking.
The neighbourhood plan says
adopted,
35%
and that was
affordable.
adopted 2016, wasn't it? So yes, that would seem to be a reasonable.
Right. So in other words, this plan, this application does not meet the neighbourhood plan, which is the latest plan which we should be looking at. It's not a spatial strategy issue, but it is a valid policy that we should be looking at. Okay. Going back then to CS9, one of the things on CS9, which is now a policy which can be considered, obviously questioned in Braunston, but can be considered here, it states clearly that greenfield sites adjoining plan limits development of local service centre will only be allocated and released where a need to maintain a sufficient and phased supply of deliverable and developable land. Now, I don't see any evidence presented by the officers on this point. We've already identified tonight that we have a 5-year housing supply, and in fact, on my rough calculations, significantly more than a 5-year housing supply, given the change from 123 houses, so 142 to 123, requiring 100 houses less. Also, we have the appeal just recently, which produced another 100 houses into it, maybe all not delivered within the 5 years, recognised, but it's more houses into that pot. And of course, there was other sites which we know about, which were not included in December figures, one of which is about 3/4 built now, quite significantly. So I think looking at that, the significant supply there. So I question the evidence presented on that, insufficient evidence presented. I then move on and think, there's quite a lot of argument put forward that this was in the 2017 draft plan. It was only the draft plan, and we never got any further than the draft plan because of other developments come along and decisions made and people voting in a particular way that meant that we didn't end up with a 5-year housing supply. But I'm just questioning whether this is a premature application. That we're in a position where within the next 3 to 4 months, we'll have a draft local plan. All sites will be evaluated on an equitable basis, and this site doesn't get a jump on everybody else. And I just question that. Maybe it's a planning policy issue or a planning issue, but we're in a position where this may be a premature application, given the argument that just because it was in the local plan last time, it's going to be in the local plan this time. That is not necessarily the case.
If I can just clarify the
Thank
point,
you.
what we were trying to make on that point is not that just because it was in last time, it will be allocated again this time. That's not what we were trying to say. What we were trying to say in the report was that an assessment was done at that time of the site's acceptability for housing. And at that time, it was considered to be acceptable for housing. No weight can be given to that local plan because it was never adopted. But just in terms of policy and thinking, it was a reasonable site. And that's why, as officers, we consider it is a reasonable site for housing.
I understand that. I'm just now looking forward and saying that we have a situation within the next 3 to 4 months of a draft local plan, which will have taken all the call for sites brought forward. It will be considered, and the ranking of those sites across the whole of the county will be such that the best sites will be put forward. It doesn't necessarily mean that this site will come forward. It may, but it may not. And I'm just wondering whether it's a premature application in that respect, given its original point. I've covered that point before. I am concerned about parking. This has been raised, a number of people have raised this, and I'd just like to ask a question on parking. Have the garages been included in the number of spaces for parking in relation to the Appendix 1 policy document?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the garages have been included as parking spaces.
Isn't that contrary to what that says? In other words, there's no evidence I can see for provision of storage elsewhere in each of the sites. And one of the requirements is if there's storage elsewhere, then the garages can be part of that parking. But if not, we shouldn't include the garages.
As part of our parking standards in our adopted plan from 2014, garages are above the average side so that they include storages. They're 3 meters by 6 meters, which is bigger than your standard garage.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it can be classed as a space. If it was below 3 meters by 6 meters, we couldn't class it as a space.
Okay, fine. Because that did worry me that we're including those as parking spaces, but that then still creates a question mark over that. And I'm very concerned at the parking, as mentioned. I haven't had a response from the officers on that. So those are the key points I've had. The next point is in relation to the documentation presented tonight. I presume that the unnumbered conditions are in fact informatives, although the paper doesn't say that. There's no statement about informatives, but I presume that is the case.
No, so Chair, there are a number of conditions that are in there that for some reason in the formatting didn't get numbered. So most of those, the ones that have got reasons by them. So in fact, I think that the whole list is all conditions. There are no informatives on there. Yeah, right. Apologies for that.
Right. However, there's one informative that's not on there that's very close to our hearts, and that's the SIL informative. It's not mentioned at all, and I would have thought, given our experiences on SIL,
that would go on as a standard.
Okay, but I think it's important that the members are aware that that's gone on there as well. I think, yeah, there's one final question, something about water tankers. There's a mention of water tankers coming onto site in a swept area for water tankers. Well, why are water tankers coming through a residential site?
From memory, I think it's something to do with the FOWL system from the site. And there's a pumping station. So I think it's for them to come in and maintain the pumping station. Right. So where the pond is, just north of that, that's the pumping station for, I think it is the FOWL and the surface water. So it's for them to maintain it.
So this is not on main sewage.
It will connect it, so it will connect into an angular water system,
right?
But the way the site falls, it falls all the way towards the pond, but the system has to come back through the site to get to Mill Lane.
Right, okay, I'm struggling to understand that. So we have a collection point and then a pumping station from there. And
yeah.
Just in case the pumps break down, we need access for a water tanker.
Well, yeah, well, I think they have to do that anyway for maintenance. But the sweep path analysis for that size vehicle will be used for a refuse vehicle anyway. So it ensures the refuge lorry can get down there, but I think it is for the maintenance of the pumping stations.
Okay. All right. So that's because the land falls to the north east,
No, it all falls towards the pond and the
or falls, yes.
yeah, falls
to the
down
east.
that way to the east.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry.
okay. So all the land falls to the east if you have to pump it back to Mill Lane.
Yeah, so how they've like done their drainage scheme, it would all go into that, the surface water drainage goes all into that pond. It then have a greenfield discharge, but through a pumping station back into Mill Lane. Because they couldn't carry on east because it would go through third-party land.
Right. So this is not, I must admit, I have not read the, I'd presume because there's so little on the drainage, that this is not then a filtration pond. This is a pond for.
It will have an element of filtration, but not full,
sufficient.
but not full filtration. It will have a greenfield rate discharge of 5 litres a second back into the angular water, surface water sewer.
Right, so that water will go into the foul sewer, the 5 litres.
No, surface water. There's
Surface
a surface water and a foul sewer on Mill Lane.
That's separate. Okay, thank you. That's all I've got, Chairman. Thank you on this occasion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cross. I think you've been waiting patiently.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you know, I can concur with what has just been said because it is that all the points are exceedingly valid. Parking is one of my bugbears. We had this issue at Barleythorpe and government guidelines seem to dictate how many cars each household will have. Those that put these guidelines forward, I don't know where they live, I don't know what sort of people they are, but they are not practical people. And I have said before in this meeting that such guidelines should be disregarded because this is a practical development and it will be lived in by practical people who have vehicles. So I am not happy with the parking. However, I am very happy that the parish council accept that there should be limited development within the village. And I take that as being very positive. The lovely agent sort of finished off by saying, basically, this is an urban design. Yes, it is an urban design, Mr. Chairman, and where we are in the middle of beautiful England, in one of the most rural areas we have. And I think it is high time that this council starts to really push for some proper, tasteful development that people wish to buy and to live in and to cherish, and not to have to live in brick boxes. So this is a totally missed opportunity. Furthermore, down to the bottom right-hand side, there was an area, I believe there, surrounded by trees on 3 sides, that a few years ago was refused planning permission. And I believe there were a few houses in there and a section for allotments. So how we can refuse one that is in a secluded area with few houses and actually accept this vast increase in the number of houses for Cottesmore, I am unable to understand. The weight of the local neighbourhood plan. We should take account of that local plan. And Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, without going back to slide 18, I could say a lot more, but I think I have said enough and my colleagues have also said plenty. Thank you.
Indication from Councillor Harvey, so if I can bring her forward as I'd promised earlier.
Thank you very much, Chair. And it's just with regard to waste, because actually, since Rutland declared a climate emergency emergency, wasn't it? I'm never sure on the second word. Waste is a really, really important factor, and it speaks to CS2. But the national planning policy for waste, at paragraph 8, is very clear. It says when determining planning applications for non-waste development, which is this, local planning authorities should, to the extent appropriate to their responsibilities, ensure that the likely impact of proposed non-waste related development on existing waste management facilities and on sites and areas allocated for waste management is acceptable and does not prejudice the implementation of the waste hierarchy, and that new non-waste development makes sufficient provision for waste management and promotes good design to secure the integration of waste management facilities with the rest of the development and in less developed areas with the local landscape. This includes providing adequate storage facilities at residential premises, for example, by ensuring that there is sufficient and discrete provision for bins to facilitate a high quality, comprehensive and frequent household collection service, and the handling of waste arising from the, it goes on to say about construction. But I think as a committee and as a planning authority, we need to start taking waste very, very seriously. It is part of our design guidelines that are newly out. So that is our latest thing. I haven't got them with me. And it is part of CS2. Essentially, it's written into our core strategy 2, the last paragraph. So I suppose my question is, and I take the point, it can be added on again. But my question is, when, as a planning authority, are we going to start taking waste seriously and ensuring that our developers are actually looking at waste as seriously as they look at road safety and everything else? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor McCartney.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm also a ward member for Cottesmore, and I try to toe a really difficult line between having to come to committee to maintain an open mind as possible here, and also having to receive an awful lot of communication from residents of the ward about this. It's really difficult, that is, and I came here with the same list of problems on this application that actually I've heard from a number of other colleagues here, which gives me a great deal of peace of mind that my issues with this are not simply skewed by the fact that this is an area close to my own heart. Unless anybody else wishes to contribute to the debate, I think I'm happy enough to make a proposal on this.
Thank you. I would like just make a comment or two. I found this report one of the most intriguing that we've had before us recently, because it seemed to me perfectly clear that the officers were confident in their opinion over the housing supply, the 5-year housing supply. They were confident in the way that policy was being implemented, and yet they were worried. I think it's perfectly clear from the report that an inspector might come along and challenge that. Now, I take the point entirely that it is a rolling figure, and that there is a difference between applications which have been approved and count towards that total, and applications which actually have been built within the timescale or in the process of being built, and that is where there is an anomaly. I would also say that the inspectorate, although it is a corporate body, is a matter of individual inspectors, and one inspector may take a particular view. We're again, sorry to go technical, this business of tilting. How far do you actually say, well, we've got to allow for the eventuality? I couldn't couldn't agree with Councillor Cross in the sense that I take the officer's advice that if if transport or environmental officer makes a definitive ruling, that is a professional ruling. I am an amateur. And I've seen several occasions when I've voted on the wrong side, if you like. And I think the very fact that we had costs awarding against us. Now, my heart, and I think as a lifelong Rutlander, someone who I know other people do as well, have the character of this county very much in mind. I have no question at all. I would support the parish's view. I've got to stand back and try and look at evidence-based. My own feeling is that we have reached a point when I personally think we make a stand. Again, other members, I won't repeat what's been said, point out that Cottesmore itself would be perfectly happy with development. It doesn't want to stagnate, but it doesn't want a huge carbuncle stuck on the edge, as his current manager would say. But it should grow organically. It could well be that over the period we're talking about, that 93 houses is appropriate, but let them come organically in smaller units so that they're integrated in the village. You're talking about people's quality of life, and they do not want, and I take the point that various other members have made, they do not simply want, or we don't want to provide dormitory town in little boxes. We want communities. I certainly couldn't support the recommendation tonight. I think it's made perfectly clear that the design and the layout is not appropriate, that alone. So it is the wrong time, the wrong place. Various things are coming forward. I think Councillor Gordon Brown, your native Heath had somewhere say, send them back to think again. I rather seem to remember at various worker matches. So therefore, I certainly at the moment could not support, but Councillor McCartney was prepared to put a proposal forward. And I'm taking legal advice for the moment, but then we'll take that.
Just going to come in, obviously, with my usual, what I really must say to everybody is that obviously it's obviously up for you to make the decision. You're going to get an officer recommendation, but we've just got to make sure that whatever refusals that is put forward is, it will stand up to scrutiny on the planning merits of the case. So that's what we're particularly looking at is, and I know that that has been discussed in points today. So, but I think the key element is that it's got to stand up. We've got to have robust evidence to substantiate it as well. And certainly on highways grounds, you've got a highways officer saying that there are no highways issues. And it is very, very clear on all case law that it has to be significant for you to be able to stand up and be able to substantiate that. So it's just really my little thing out to you all that, you know, whatever, if we are going to go against some recommendation, that we do have very, very clear planning reasons and they can stand up to scrutiny of any planning appeal. Thank you.
With that very sound advice from our legal officer, I'll ask Councillor McCartney if she would like to put forward a proposal. I'll then look for a seconder. And again, as we just heard, there will need to be reasons should you be.
Sorry, so I was just going to say, I think what we might need to do is if we're going to have the second proposer, if we go forward and just discuss some of the reasons before you actually go forward with your proposal. If sorry, Chair.
No,
yeah,
that's fine. Councillor McCartney.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, highways was not one of my reasons for rejecting this. I know many of residents in the village don't like the access opposite the primary school, but for me, actually, it's not the standout problem. My problem with it is the fact that it's 93 houses on a site assessed to 77 when the village wants 20 to 30. So I would like to propose, Chair, that we refuse this application for the following reasons. It is contrary to policies CS4, CS10, 11 of our extant local plan. It is outside the PLDs. It is contrary to, so I was going to use the neighbourhood plan with a greater degree of weight, but as Councillor Brown has raised, that might not hold too much sway later. But the issue of the neighbourhood plan policy about affordable housing is more recent than our own. So I will draw on that as another reason for rejection, as it is contrary to, was it policy H6 of the neighbourhood? H3 was it? A big one. H3 in Cottesmore neighbourhood plan regarding affordable housing, it's offering 30.2 rather than 35. Excuse me. Local infrastructure is above capacity. St Nicholas Primary School and the related letter from the ICB about local healthcare. I've got, hang on, bear with me, going through my notes.
Coming just to
Go
that
on.
point of the local
Yeah.
infrastructure, I don't know in the appeal if you saw that obviously we have SIL.
I know we do, I
yeah,
know we
yeah.
do, yeah, I know. Can we use the level of public objection as a reason?
If I may, Chair, I think looking at my notes and Councillor Brown has been more detailed in some of the actual quoting the various sections, and I was assuming that we were going to be backfilling, if you like, with the very clear points that you made, Councillor Brown.
Happy to raise a few of those. I think it's an interesting point here. I think the residents and the parish council made the point that they're not against development on this site. And I think we maybe should start off with a refusal on that basis, that we're not against the development of this site. What we're looking for is an appropriate development of this site. And if we go back, and I know I dissed the 2017 draft plan, but it did say 60 houses, not 93, and that may be more appropriate. And therefore, from that point of view, we're not against development of the site. It is the particulars of this development that don't stand up to scrutiny by this committee. And those particular issues are, as we've said before, the design code and the finish of the houses has, certainly in the view of the committee, I think, is taking the view that the design code has not been fully addressed. And I think even Mr. Johnson made the comment that our urban design officer would have preferred significantly more stone rather than the red brick. So that does tie in with that. That's not against officers' advice, very much in line with officers' advice. It's, I think, the COT H6 as well, the speeding issue and the speed going into the village. It's a minor point, but I think that should be in there. The question of it being premature, I think it's clear from what's been said by the officers and by the portfolio holder in the email to members, which I did get approval today to make public. So I just make that point. So particularly in the point that future decisions will be made based on the evidence that we have a 5-year housing supply. So I think that's very important. But I think this should be evaluated against the other sites that come forward in the draft plan to see whether this is as good as the rest. We've also got the issue around the safety of the leap on the site, that it is remote and therefore potentially not having the appropriate level of public safety. I don't see any report from the our community safety officer on that point, and therefore it's silent on that, but it's certainly an issue. I think the point raised on waste management is a very good one, although Mr. Gove may be reducing from 7 bins in the next few weeks. It certainly won't be down to 2 bins. I think that has got to be taken into account, and that is a policy which is above our local plan at a higher level. I think the question of parking is an issue, particularly the appropriateness of the layout of the parking on each site. I think that was a very good point raised by the residents. Tail to tail parking, where you have 2 or 3 cars, is far from ideal. People park on the road, and these roads, we've had problems already, as we know, in Barleythorpe. We've had them in South Luffenham, where people park on the road and the refuse vehicles can't go around, and that causes a lot of distress for not just the members of the residents, but also for our contractor as well in our environment department. So positioning of waste bins, very important. There's also the question of, I see very little in here about long-term sustainability, the use of gas in this particular situation, the lack of renewables. Given what's said in the NPPF, there's not even a nod to it. And I think the NPPF is fairly clear in that now. It's not just a question of, take it or leave it. So those are the key points, I think. And also, it's a minor point, but no section 106 terms, heads of terms agreed and signed at this point in time. I know that's not a formal point, but one that we
I just
feel
wanted
very
to,
strongly about.
I just wanted to say that I am the solicitor who is actually undertaking that section 106, and I can clarify that it has been drafted. So that's just to let members know that. But I just wanted to just come in on the prematurity point, actually, because obviously it's a difficult one, but I think to use that as a reason for refusal, I think you do have to show that there is going to be fundamental harm to any emerging plan. So that's where the sort of the robust sort of evidence base has to come in. Sorry.
So we
May I continue?
sorry.
Yeah, sorry, we've got to get.
Hmm?
I think Justin will have to come in and just go through
Very
this,
good.
yeah.
Yes.
So I was just going to go through some of the points that we've got so far. In terms of the design and material, so materials in particular on the design, and I've got bin storage that is also linked to that as well, which we can pick up. Obviously, outside the plan limits of development and the fact that we have a 5-year housing land supply can pick up on that, and the affordable housing in the I'll make reference to the neighbourhood plan policy rather than our own policy, which it would comply with. Then you've made reference to the Cottesmore H6 and the speeding policy there, and again the parking points as well. I suppose, like I said, for myself, I think that the issues around parking and highway safety, obviously we've got no objection from Robin. So I just put my caveat that I said earlier, that I think that there is a risk in trying to defend on that argument. But I hear the points that were raised by members. The point that I would suggest that we don't include is this one about impact on infrastructure. That was one that was put in at the recent appeal decision, and the inspector was quite clear. We have SIL. It's unreasonable to add that as a reason for refusal. So I would strongly advise members not to include that as a reason. Thank you, Chairman.
I think Mr. Johnson's made it clear what we're not objecting on. So, and you put the detail on that. Sorry, Councillor Gordon-Brown. Yeah.
So to go back to our list, before we got sidetracked, I had 3 issues which were raised here in debate tonight, which I was going to raise as issues which we might use in a refusal. One was that this is contrary to our design guide, because the materials are not sufficient, not sufficiently close to the vernacular of the settlement in Cottesmore. The second is the amenity impact in relationship to the existing adjacent development. And the third is, the third is this safety issue around the children's leap or play area, which is too far away because that open space is slapped on the side as an afterthought. And the fourth was the impact on the view on the approach from Mill Lane, which I would assess as unacceptable.
Do I have a seconder, please?
I've got.
Councillor Ball,
Should we just make it very clear then the reasons for refusal? Have you got those, Justin? Can you just read those out? I think that's very clear.
I've got, contrary to the design guide in relation to materials and bin storage, I've got impacts on the properties to the south of the site. The location of the leap in terms of no overlooking and safety issues around its location, the view from Mill Lane, and then the other points, the affordable housing, the speeding from Cottesmore, the 5-year housing land supply, outside the plan limits of development, and then I think within the 5-year housing land supply element, I think we could pick up on this argument about prematurity. I don't think I'd put it in as a separate thing, because I think there are questions about how far the plan has got, but I appreciate what members are saying in terms of the concerns that they've got, so I'll pick that up in that reason.
Within the neighbourhood plan as well, which again, councillor indicated we get one part because of its age, 217, and they not perhaps can take it down, but they are certainly for it. So I think we've done that.
I think we have.
At one point I did raise, Chair, was the issue of sustainability of the site and the fact we're using gas. There's not even a nod towards a more sustainable approach. And I think that is a requirement under MPPF, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that there's arguments that some of that's picked up through building control now, but what I would say is that I think we can include it in the design arguments and because it's picked up in our design guide as well, so we can perhaps pick it up in.
Councillor Payne.
I'll just throw my 2 penny worth in. I think I remember hearing that not all the affordable homes will have charge points. And there's a question of equality in that as well. Why should only some of the homes on this development have charging points for their cars and not all? It's ridiculous. It's unsustainable.
I don't want to reopen the debate. Right. We have had the proposal for refusal, which has been seconded. The reasons for it have been itemised. Councillor McCartney.
When I think, is it too big in relation to the size of the settlement?
No, I was picking that point up as well. The concerns put out over development site, and I think what council board was talking about. About some development acceptable on the site, but smaller sites. Lower density and possibly, some on this site, some elsewhere within Cottesmore as well.
I think we're clear enough. I don't want to muddy the water with too many sub-amendments, put it that way. So it has been proposed and seconded. All those in favour of the proposal, please. In favour of
refusal.
That is for refusal. Yeah. This is for refusal. Yeah.
It's 9, Chair.
So that's
unanimous.
Is unanimous. So thank you very much indeed. I would say to members of the public, if you came for that one item, I will just have a brief adjournment. You're very welcome to listen to the other riveting things that we have to consider this evening. Okay, thank you.
The ladies for 1 moment. You can carry on.
Yeah. indeed, we move on to item 6B, which is the Ryle one. Right.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is at the River Gwash Trout Farm at Belsall Lane in Ryehall. The application site you can see there is outlined in red. And I just have an aerial photograph where you can see the site is in this area. This is the application layout itself. The proposal comprises the erection of 11 dwellings, a couple of the plot or one plot fronts onto the main road, and then the rest of the development fronts onto the access track and the cul-de-sac around. And the proposal is for a mix of single and two-story dwellings, 2, 3, 4 and 5 bed properties, and plots 1 to 3 would be the affordable housing element, which are the ones outlined in red on the screen. I just scroll down to this site. You can just see the site is in this location here. You can see the site to the north was a housing allocation in the adopted plan. The site itself is adjacent to, but outside of the planned limits of development. So in terms of house designs, again, I've not gone through all of them, but you can see there that they're 2-story, single story, and this is one with room in the roof space as well. Not dissimilar to what's in and around the area. This is the view, I think, from the south of the site. So I'm stood at the access there. And then this is the other direction, and you can see some of the properties adjacent, though not too dissimilar to what's proposed there. This is just within the site, looking at, I think, the new housing development that was on that housing allocation. You can see the proximity there. And then as you go down, this is the access road in the site. You've got, so the River Gwash is at the bottom end of that picture there. This is the existing house. I think that's the house that was associated with the trout farm when it was built. And then again, views around the site. This is just a list of all of the relevant policies for the proposal that are set out in the main committee agenda. And just whilst I remember, in addition to the conditions that are listed in the agenda, there would be one additional one from Anglian Water with regards to surface water drainage that needs to be included on the scheme. In terms of why we've got the application, the applicants have set out in the submission that the business is no longer viable. It's been operating for, I think, about 25 years, but there is a decline in the sector, and that there are also issues with the water supply from the river, which suffers from seasonal parasite problems, which again is having an impact on the viability and the extent of production during the warmer months. And so they're proposing to close the business down at this location, but will continue to operate on their other site. In terms of the principle, it's a similar situation to the last application in terms of it is a site that is outside of planned limits of development, albeit on the edge of. I suppose the difference here is that it's got a business use that is declining and is no longer viable. So this is a suitable alternative use on the site that would help to provide some additional housing to supplement our 5-year housing land supply, which I won't go over again because we've just debated that in some detail. So as outlined on the site there, the use of the site is no longer viable, so they're looking for an alternative use there, and it does meet our housing needs. Residential amenity, as you can see from the layout that I've showed earlier, there is no impact on the amenities of adjacent properties. There's sufficient separation distance to ensure that there's no overlooking or loss of light. Highway Authority have raised no objections to the proposal. There would be a Section 106 agreement to secure the relevant affordable housing provision, and I believe terms have been agreed, and we're on the process of finalising the draft agreement. Design and layout, as I've shown from the plans, the design is considered to be appropriate and accord with our general provision. Sorry, that slide is slightly wrong there. There's no master plan on this one. There is no significant adverse impact. There's no objection from the lead flood authority or the EA or Anglian Water, and there's no objections from ecology. There were originally some concerns, but a buffer zone to the river has now been included to address those concerns. So as is set out there, it's 11 new dwellings. It's adjacent to the planned limits of development of Ryle. The principle is considered to be acceptable in land use terms. There is no harm from the development in terms of visual amenity, residential amenity, highway safety or ecology, and it would provide the relevant affordable housing provision. So on that basis, it is recommended for approval, Chairman, subject to the completion of the Section 106 agreement to secure the affordable housing and the additional condition from Anglian Water. I said surface water earlier. It relates to foul water drainage details being agreed prior to installation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. I've got Mr. Amos. I hope I've pronounced it correctly, from the Parish Council. Three minutes and 3 minutes for questions.
And the name is correct, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I'll keep this extremely brief. Firstly, I would like to thank the Planning Committee for taking into account the Ryle and Belmsthorpe Parish Council response to this application. Having read the significant volume of submissions for it, I am pleased that the proposed extent of development has provided a buffer ecology zone between the rear garden fences of the proposed development and the River Gwash. This will assist in maintaining the appearance and green space between the individual communities of Ryle and Belmsthorpe, and with the proposed additional tree planting will aid in softening the landscape. As a number of hard concrete surfaces currently exist on the site, savings on environmental and biodiversity issues may also be available for the development. This will also offer a reduction on construction traffic entering and leaving the site through narrow rural lanes, reducing risk and improving highway safety. And finally, the Parish Council have no objections to the proposed 3 affordable houses on the 11 property site development and the design and materials proposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? You escaped. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed.
And call Mr. Ball for the applicant, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here this evening representing the landowners. My wife and I have owned that site for 25 years. We've run the fish farming business there for 25 years, and I'm here tonight to answer any questions, any further questions, or anything that the committee members might have.
Just listening this evening, it's sort of, I think the main thing about the site is this isn't a speculative application. We have followed the planning process for the last 8 years. We've made representations when appropriate, and we've answered all the questions and queries along the way. And this is a site that has had no objections from any neighbours. It's supported by the parish council. It's been done in a tasteful manner. It's in keeping with the locality, and most of the buildings are made out of local stone. And more importantly, it's sympathetic to the village itself. And my wife and I, although we're not the developer, we're not physically going to build it. We've spent a lot of time and we've worked really hard with the developer and his architect to make sure that this will fit in the village of Rhyl and won't become something that people see as an eyesore in the future. That's it really. It's something that it is not a speculative development. We have followed the planning process all the way through. Thank you.
Any questions, members? Councillor Payne.
My apologies if I've missed it in my papers.
Sorry,
As you sat through the last agenda, you appreciate that we spent a lot of time on
That's
that.
all right.
How do you plan to heat these buildings?
That will be something that would be picked up by building control, and obviously I'm not the developer and I'm not the builder, so I'm not going to do that. But it, as was touched on earlier, I understand initially that it's gas central heating because that's phase one of it next door. So again, that would be a building control issue and a technical point that will be taken up with the developer.
Gas is not something that we're desperately in favour of.
So yeah, I can understand that.
Heat pumps and solar panels do tickle us far more. But that with you.
Yeah, okay.
Councillor Cross.
I'd just like to commend you and your wife for working so hard to get this project to where it is today in sympathy, with the rural environment. Thank you very much indeed.
Any other member? Councillor Andrew Brown.
I'd like to echo what Councillor Cross has just said, and I think we should be commending your approach to other developers.
Thank you.
Any others? No. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Thank you.
Right, in that case, I know I've got the ward member there. Unless he indicates otherwise, I'll assume he's happy to remain in the audience rather than coming forward. But if he wishes to contribute at any point, please indicate. Members. Yep. Absolutely fine. Is that a second, Councillor Gordon Brown?
I just want to clarify one point, Chair. There's not a specific number of affordable homes approved, it's 3.
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Yeah,
it doesn't say that in the conditions. But...
Yeah, so it does in the report. Then, and it's the 3 at the top outlined in red there.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely. That's fine. Thank you. That's the only point I had. And could we, in any way, the buffer zone, this buffer zone up to the gouache, is there any way we can make sure that is maintained as non-residential land? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, well, I think we can do it through a condition. I'm just wondering what. So I'm just double checking what if we've got anything on there to that effect. But if not, we can certainly put something on. We could certainly put something on there that it be made remain as an ecological buffer zone and not be used and no domestic paraphernalia or something like that in there. I'm sure we can come up with some wording.
Don't want to worry the gentleman that this isn't harking back to what was said earlier, but a couple of us were more than a little bit concerned with the pond on the previous one. I take it that this river, there will be guarantees that it will not be a danger to children. Children love water and they can find so many ways of drowning in it.
I mean, there are conditions about boundary treatments and things like that, and I don't see this site being any different to the numerous sites. There's lots of residential properties that back on in this location, so we'll just secure a suitable boundary treatment.
Yeah, just to take up
on the point raised by Councillor Brown, how do we future-proof, if you like, the maintenance? As you know, we have some sites around the county which have become troublesome eyesores, both to the parish councils, and the rules and regulations are sort of buried or lost in the mist of time. Can we be a little, I mean, I'm fully in favour of this proposal, but I think we do need just to have a care.
In terms of the maintenance of this wildlife
Well,
site.
so that it doesn't become, you know.
Yeah.
Out of hand and stuff. Where sometimes you can get growth which starts to impinge into the river course, you know, you get various things.
We can add a condition that requires details of the management of that area.
Right. And
So-
funding for that?
Big idea.
That would ultimately be at the developer's cost.
So we would pick that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it would just be a condition. I imagine the management plan would set out what they get, how they're going to manage it, and it would be for the lifetime of the development.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
That's right.
if we are going to do that, we just need to propose to make just a variation to amend to add those two conditions. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Sorry, I've got Councillor Andrew Brown,
I'm very sorry.
and then I'll bring you.
Just who's going to, or ownership, is that buffer strip, who's going to own that? Because whoever does is going to have some sort of riparian rights and responsibilities there.
Yeah, I've not been given details of who owns that. There are, I would guess, two options that would, well, three probably. Two. One, that it would be the residents that back onto it. Or that it goes into some form of management company that would be an option. And I don't know, that would be up to the developers and the landowner when they're drawing up the sales contracts. I think what we can secure as an authority is make sure that there's an appropriate boundary treatment and that there's an appropriate system for maintaining and managing that land.
Councillor Cross.
Point's been covered by Councillor Brown, thank you.
I think I got somebody about ready to propose 10 minutes ago.
Oh, you want me to do it again with my radar on?
With the amendment.
Yes, with the two additional conditions.
Yes.
Yes.
I'd like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation with the additions of whatever our legal eagle just said.
I'll second that.
Seconded. Those in favour, please. That's unanimous.
Unanimous, Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. Fine, we move on to the next item, which is the Ridlington one. So, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is land after Polygoat Road in Ridlington. I'll just draw members' attention to the addendum paper where the agent had just clarified some points in the report. I think there were points that were made by a number of our consultees, but it's just for members to note the points that are made there. In terms of the application site, you can see it there outlined in red. It's got the old mill and mill cottage to the east, and then to the west you've got a number of cottages and a residential property opposite as well. There are some archaeological earthworks that are a heritage asset across the way. And I'll just pick up on that point now. In the agenda, there was reference to getting comments back from our ecologist. I've had those today, and they have confirmed that they are happy that the proposal can be approved, subject to a condition requiring investigative works to be carried out whilst development is taking place. So in terms of the site itself, you can see there the mill cottage and properties there, two cottages here, and then the property opposite, and then you've also got the main, obviously, village of Bridlington to the northeast there. The proposal itself is for a fairly large two-storey dwelling and garage. I think it's 3-bedroom upstairs with a 4th bedroom downstairs. And there you can see the design, which is, I think it's an ironstone with a natural slate roof in keeping with the surrounding area. Seems like they're all like this today. Planned limits of development are here, and you can see the conservation area boundary as well in the purple. Planned limits of development go around here. This site is in here, so it's directly adjacent to, and the reason it's recommended for approval is officers consider it to be really an infill with these 2 existing dwellings here. So just so that you can see the site itself, this is part of the site, and as you can see, it's a domesticated sort of area at the moment. Some it looks like it's got a tennis court on there when these were taken, and grass. This is the looking towards the village. Thought I got one of, oh no, sorry, I hadn't got to here. So the access point is going in this location somewhere around here, and you can see there's the mill cottage and the associated barns in behind that tractor there. The reason it's at committee is because there is slight conflict with the planning policies in so much as is set out in the report, it is outside of the plan limits for development. Although in this case, given the separation distances, there is no residential harm. There's no objection from highways, and the design has been carefully thought out and takes into account all of the heritage impacts and consideration that you would wish to see. So in terms of design, it picks up and reflects other buildings within the village, and it also reflects the appropriate materials as well. There's no significant impact with landscaping. I think the agent has set out in her letter, there's been an existing, I think, natural hedge planted between the site and one of the residential properties, and the hedgerow is to be retained as well along the frontage. No objection from drainage, and no objections from ecology or from Heritage England or the conservation officer. So yes, as I've said, the site is outside the plan limits for Ridlington, but it is surrounded by housing on either side and directly opposite. There was positive pre-application given, but that was given at a time when we didn't have a 5-year housing land supply. But I think notwithstanding that, the NPPF does allow and indicate that council's policy should now be supportive of infill development within more rural settlements to allow them to grow naturally and provide support and facilities within those villages, where our policy currently is arguably a bit out of date in so much as it doesn't allow that natural growth where it's directly adjacent to but not within the plan limits of development. So the scheme is well designed, as I've said. There would be no adverse impact on the character of the village or the conservation area. It forms an infill gap. There is the conflict with the restraint village policy, but we consider that in terms of the NPPF, that does allow for some infill, and on that basis and on that balance, it is considered that this application can be supported. It's also I think I just point out that there's been no objection from the parish, and I think there's been 4 letters of support as well submitted in relation to the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Holt, would you like to come forward on the usual thing? 3 minutes and 3 minutes for questions. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman and committee members, thank you for giving me the time to speak. So obviously I'm Julie Holt and I'm here tonight with my husband Andrew, and we've put in this application to build on the land that is adjacent to our existing house that we currently use as an extension to our garden in order for us to downsize and to have my elderly mother to live with us. We've lived in Ridlington for almost 22 years. We've brought our 3 boys up here. We've got good friends in the village, and it's our dearest wish to be able to remain in the village. As a family, we've always contributed to life in Ridlington. I've been a trustee of the village playing fields for over 15 years, and Andy served on the parochial church council for the same amount of time. The boys he's also a member of the Ridlington Cricket Club along with our boys. So the main driver really for our application, now that our boys have grown up and almost fled the nest, is to enable us to stay in the village by downsizing and to provide a suitable home for my 86-year-old mother. She currently lives alone over 25 miles away, and she suffers badly with arthritis, which severely impacts her mobility and balance, making her very unsteady on her feet, as well as suffering other debilitating ailments. So our current house isn't suitable for her. We've got steps leading to the entrance as well as no downstairs bathroom. I've recently had to have an emergency personal alarm fitted for her. She has some help currently, but she can't live independently for very much longer. So the design of the new house has been created very much to cater for my mother's needs, with a self-contained ground floor living area, giving her space whilst enabling us to support her fully. So, and from the outset, we've worked really closely with the planning department and sought pre-planning advice and guidance, as well as further advice once our architect Karen had drawn up the plans. We've been absolutely determined that what we are proposing fits in well and is sympathetic to the group of dwellings in the immediate vicinity, as well as the wider village environment. We were given positive advice throughout and submitted the application in good faith. We're really heartened that our application has the support of our immediate neighbours, as well as others in the village, including the parish council, and that our fellow villagers have taken the time and trouble to comment positively on the website in favour of our application. By downsizing to this new house, we'd be able to stay in the village we love, take care of my mother, as well as releasing both our current house and my mother's for new young families to enjoy as much as we have. So thank you so much for your time and attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Councillor Cross.
I think I've only got one question. I think you must educate my daughter as to how to look after me when I'm in the same condition as your mother.
Well, that's material. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Councillor Gordon Brown.
Just a minor point, Chair. I presume you'll be developing the site yourself.
Yes.
And having contractors. Just a couple of points, which I'll be raising later as informatives on the construction management plan. And that's in relation to operators, operatives and visitors coming to the site during construction, that all vehicles are accommodated on site rather than on the side roads, as we saw.
Sure.
The side road is very, well, the road is very
It's not
narrow.
very wide at all, yeah.
And also that you'd be happy to reinstate the verges if there is any damage from vehicles after construction.
Absolutely,
So the two
yeah.
informatives I'd be seeking, Chair.
Any other members? Thank you very much, Mrs. Holt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, we move to the debate. Mr. Cross, you are one of the ward members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, you know, I've read through the report and it's lovely to see the neighbours and the parish council in favour of this. And I think looking at what we've seen tonight, what we've heard tonight, it would be a lovely fitting infill development. I don't like infill, but a little bit of development at that end of the village. And I must say, I'd be very pleased to propose it when the time comes. Thank you.
I would endorse those remarks as the other ward member. Other members?
Just a really a minor point, really. Just reading through the report and the comments made by the design officer, can the committee take it as read? Obviously, that exact stone product important to fit locally. I think from what we've heard, that's going to follow. And then the porch. Is this the local style? Can I assume that those questions that have been raised by the design officer will be addressed in the final agreement?
I think it would, well, the designers, as you can see on there, I think the agent did pick up on that in some of the
It's just
points.
said when I went there on Friday, so I assume this is fairly late.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
a few
I think the agent had commented that they picked up on I think others that were around the village. I don't think it is something that we would wish to insist on any amendment or anything like that. I think as officers we are happy.
It just read slightly differently. Okay, thank you, Chairman.
But it's just one of those small points. But I think it's one of those occasions. I like the idea of the term of infill as an organic way for villages to grow. I think this is one of those occasions when the fact that the development is technically the other side of the road from the line of the PLD isn't something that we should necessarily fixate on. But I'm generally like the idea of this committee keeping to within lines of the PLD. So I think we should note that we are waiving our objections to that on this occasion because we can see the value of the infill argument.
Chairman, just through you, I think as officers, it wouldn't be that we would be coming frequently with these things that are outside the plan limits of development. We have plan limits of development for a reason. I think it was just in this particular instance, you can see that the plan limits of development comes here. So it is on the same side of the road and there are two dwellings here. It is what is the harm of having a dwelling there? And that is the reason in policy terms, yes, it is contrary to it, but there is no harm. And on that basis, that's why it's recommended for approval.
Just before we go to a proposal, Chair, we've got the informatives that I've mentioned before, if you're happy with those.
So I've got that I was going to add a condition for a construction traffic
I think
management
there's one
plan.
already, isn't there?
Is there one on there already? Sorry, if I missed that.
I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one.
Yeah, no, I didn't think there was one on there. So
yeah,
yeah,
we need a construction management plan for that reason.
so it would be construction traffic management plan and then an informative about the reinstatement of any damage to the verge.
Right, and we've got an ecological check on it as well. I presume we'll have our standard check. In WSI, is it the is that on there?
Yeah, I think there's been an assessment and there was I don't think there was any objection from the ecologist.
Not ecology, sorry, the archaeology.
Oh, archaeology, yes, there's an
You're
additional
putting
condition to put on for that, yes.
And then finally, I think the point that Councillor Bull made, just a request for material to be approved by the planning officer. Specific materials. I think you've got the principle of material, but just the actual specific.
A sample to be submitted. Yeah,
okay.
We can add that.
That's the only points, Chair. With the clarity.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendations with the addition of one or two points.
Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Those in favour, please.
It's unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Right, we move on to the scanner.
Right then, Chairman, this application is before committee because it's on council-owned land. It's at the Enterprise Park at Ashwell Road in Oakham, and the proposal is for an MRI scanner to be installed. You can see the application site outlined in red. It's within the centre of the enterprise park. You can see on the screen here, this is the area of land where the proposal is now to go. Originally, it was to be located slightly further across to the east in this location here, which our property services team had significant concerns about because it impacted on the parking spaces and the operation of that building. So there have been extensive discussions and negotiations, and the new location is as shown here, which shows the building in this location with additional parking put within the site. It does require the removal of a light column, CCTV column, and a couple of trees, but these are proposed to be replaced and conditions in agreement with property services and some replacement landscaping elsewhere within the site to make up for what's been lost. This is the building that you can see there, fairly temporary structure. And then you can see there, so not dissimilar to sort of a porter cabin size. That's the sign. You can see that there's the lamp column that you can just see in there, and the tree to be, it's not a particularly award-winning tree, but we will get some better landscaping elsewhere within the site to make up for its loss. There are the relevant policies. Obviously, it is for a MRI scanner, lots of public benefits in terms of having that in close proximity to the main town of Oakham. There's no harm to residential amenity, given it's been located within the existing industrial site, enterprise site, not industrial site. No objection from highways, and the design, yes, it's utilitarian, but it's on an industrial estate and reasonably well screened from most of the public views. As I've said, although no space within that immediate location to put planting, proposal is that we'll get some replacement planting elsewhere within the site, and the CCTV column and lighting column will be relocated. No objections, therefore, from property services, none from drainage, and no impact from noise or anything like that. So taking into account the nature and the positive benefits that it can bring to the community, subject to the relevant conditions, it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, we haven't a relevant ward member, so open to you, members. Councillor Beggy.
It's only a point really for the construction management. Obviously, there's lots of businesses there which could be impacted, just to reduce the amount of hassle and noise for those businesses that are trying to operate during 9 to 5 hours.
I think that I've not put a condition on to that extent because it's been controlled by our property services team and it's on our land. So I think we've got more control through it being our land than through a planning condition. If members want a condition in terms of construction management plan, I can add one, but I just felt that as it's our land.
It's more just pointing out that obviously we've got a lot of tenants there.
Yeah. I think there's been a lot of discussions already. Like I say, the original location it was put in, there was a lot of concern raised about that. Where it is there, it is relatively tucked out of the way. So should have minimal impact, I would have thought. And given it's I think a fairly portable structure that's dropped in, that I think the impact should be fairly minimal when it's brought onto site.
I think my impact was more about the construction as opposed to the day-to-day
actual use. Yeah.
Any other members? Any comments? Councillor Gordon Brown. Oh, sorry, Councillor Andrew Brown.
Maybe I'll move over there. Thank you, Chairman. I did have a scan in one of these a couple of years ago, and I remember it being extremely noisy, and you had to wear ear defenders because I think that the next coin print is the nearest business there, isn't it? Are they not? What are they? Well, the one I went in wasn't. All right, I'll take your word for it, Councillor Ball.
Just to comment on that, it is something that our environmental health team have looked at, and they're satisfied that there won't be an issue from it.
I've got the right on this. I was just going to read the same point, not in relation to residential properties, but in relation to the businesses either side. But recognising, I presume that a lease, and it's not a material planning consideration, a lease will be in place for them to use this land on a temporary basis. And therefore, I presume it would be good estate management points in there, and therefore that should be accommodated. And any noise created will be, they'll have to deal with in a normal way. So that was that one. Is this for temporary planning approval or permanent planning approval? Because there's suggestions elsewhere that it's only a temporary time on site.
I believe that it's a permanent planning permission. Yeah, it's a permanent planning permission that we're granting, and I don't know what our lease arrangement is through it, but in
I
terms,
seem to remember reading somewhere it was for a 5-year period.
bear with me.
And I just wonder whether the planning should be for a 5-year period also, after installation. And then they can come back for renew thereafter. It just worries me that this is a site which is, you know, we're looking at for further development maybe. And
Well, I think the issue for me is that it's our land, so we have control over it through the lease rather than through. There's no reason why we would grant a temporary permission if you've got some issue with it being there permanently.
Okay.
In this instance, I don't think we would have. So my advice is that we go with the full permission, and property services can tie it up through the lease.
And finally, condition 5, it says within 3 months of use commencing on site, details showing the relocation of existing lighting column, CCD, etc., should be provided in writing to local planning authority. I would have thought that was rather late, and we'd want it in advance of them actually starting on site, what they're going to do about it.
My understanding, and I will double check, but my understanding is that was sort of the wording that was agreed with property services, because I think it was the time it would take them to get themselves organised to pull it all together. I will double check. If we can leave, if you can defer that element to me, I will always change it to you were saying in advance, weren't you?
I would say
if
that
property services are unhappy with
I
that.
think maybe turn it around the other way and say that proposals should be submitted for approval in advance, so that at least we're going down the road before they get on site and start knocking things down.
I must have.
Yeah, if we can, I'll speak to property services, and then if we can, I'll agree the final wording with the chairman.
Thank you.
I must admit, I've been taken aback, Chair, by the picture. That looks a remarkably temporary structure. And that looks to me like something you build in a factory so it can be put on a low loader and moved. And by very nature, it can be moved out as well as being moved in. And I'm wondering if it's going to be there longer than 5 years, because I've seen these things in numerous hospitals in my, and that's not designed for a long life. That's a 5-year lifetime. And then in 5 years' time, hopefully they'll replace it with an updated new one, but equally they may not. I'm genuinely taken aback by the look of that.
Yeah, that was exactly going to be my, not to build on this and not to be difficult. The fact that you said, I think it was almost a pre-constructed portable type building that can be erected fairly quickly, which is first class. But I think then going back to Councillor Brown, the 5-year, etc., are we saying 5 years and then to be reviewed, etc., or whatever? There's not a big problem, but perhaps there's an element of tidying up.
I think, well, my opinion is that it is an employment, site. It's got an industrial feel to it around a lot of that site, and it's not visible from outside of that site. And on that basis, I don't see there being a harm granting a full planning permission for this building. We've allowed if you think of the storage businesses where they put up the steel containers, slightly better than that, but not dissimilar, and they're kept on a permanent basis. They're not granted necessarily temporary permissions depending on the location that they're in. Like I said, I think that the only thing that I would say is that we have far more control over this site because it's ours and through the lease. And so I don't see a benefit in terms of putting on a planning condition when, as a site owner, we can agree any lease with the I'm presuming it's the NHS Trust that are putting it in
It's
there.
really, I guess, Chairman, through you, that in the unlikely event of some issues, there is an appropriate exit clause or exit agreement that would not hinder, the future development of the site. But I'm sure we're making a big issue.
I think that is all. I think that that is all taken into account because I've had discussions with our property services team, because obviously they're aware that they may wish to do something at some point in the future with that site. So I think that's all taken up into account with the agreements that they're putting forward.
And to be fair, Councillor Gordon Brown has been looking at this when he was on cabinet and all the rest of it. So I think that's okay.
Councillor Cross, perhaps you're bringing it to a conclusion.
This is the most wonderful thing that's been happening to Rutland, to get a scanner down there. And these modules are how these things come nowadays. So the council has full control over that site. So I think we are actually expending more hot air, which I love to do, than is necessary on this particular application. And therefore, I would like to propose that we follow the officer's recommendation and get the bloody thing built.
Seconded. I've got a proposal, seconder. All those in favour?
We're going to delegate it to the.
It's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. The final one on this bit is the technicality on the variation on the Uppingham one. Mr. Johnson.
Chairman, I'll just pull this one up. So this members may recall this site. It's the land south of Leicester Road, Uppingham. The site you can see is outlined in red there. It has had outline planning permission. You can see that it is a field at the moment with residential development next to it, and I think it's the sports pitch adjacent to it as well. In terms of the outline scheme, this was the indicative sort of master plan that was shown, and the proposals that have come forward are fundamentally in accordance with that, with properties fronting onto Leicester Road and then fronting onto the development site itself. The affordable housing units are located at the rear of the site, and they actually have arguably one of the better views over the fields, which is nice to see, rather than put in a less desirable area. I recommend that this one is deferred to the chairman or vice chairman for final sign off, and the reason is that this is the section 38 plan, which hasn't formally been submitted to me in the planning department as yet, but has gone to highways. And there are ever so slight differences between the plan that they've submitted for planning. In particular, this area here is made slightly wider to allow better access to the parking, and the parking arrangements here just change minorly. And again, for this plot, if I switch between the two, you'll struggle to spot the difference, but there is just a slightly different tracking on here. So I just need to get the final plan submitted, and then I'll approve that by the chairman. In terms of why it's come back to committee, it's on the basis that there is a section 106 agreement, and the affordable housing element wording has been changed slightly in accordance with what our affordable housing officer wants. I just showed some of the house types which are similar to what's been built on the adjacent site. I think they're 2, 3, and 4 bed properties think there may be a 5 as well. This is an artist impression of the frontage with the attenuation pond at the front. This is the field, and you can see the housing development adjacent to it. So the neighbourhood plan allocates the land for development in the plan period and in the future. It's considered to be sustainable development and contributes to our 5-year housing land supply. Like I say, this is reserved matters. It's already got outline. There's no adverse impact on residential amenity, and the single access T-junction was approved at the outline stage. As I've said, there is a section 106 agreement which has been, I think, is ready for signing. It's just waiting for this meeting to confirm that, the main issue was, I think it took out, in terms of the affordable housing, the requirement. The original one had some 1-bed units in there. This now takes those out as 2-bed units instead. All agreed with the affordable housing officer. Layout is in accordance with the master plan. Relatively flat site, so no significant landscape impacts. Sustainable drainage on the outline, and there was the attenuation pond that you could see at the front of the site adjacent to the road. No objections from ecology, and on that basis, as I've said, it is recommended for approval, subject to the section 106 being completed and just getting the final layout plan number, so that it ties in with the highway section 38 drawings. On that basis, Chairman, it's recommended for approval.
Right, members, well, this is a technicality, so unless you've got anything particular to say, I think we could move straight.
May I just say one comment, and certainly agreeing with this, on the affordable, and I think, to be fair, our officer has already said on this occasion, the affordable are going to be in perhaps a good position. But I think, just as a reminder really going forward, we did say that we would really like affordable in a pepper pot sort of situation where possible, because I think we can agree that there have been some historical developments where unfortunately you turn the corner and it's very obvious that they were affordable, where if they had been integrated in the development, I think it would have been more desirable. So there's no criticism. It's really, and certainly if I can quote the officers' mess that we were going to develop as part of the council in Edith Weston, then of course we did have those pepper pots. So I just think it's a brief reminder for the future that where possible, I think you get a better development. I no more.
I was just going to say, totally take on board that point, and that's what we look to do. I think the issue that we have is on the bigger sites, it's easy to do that. On sites where they're relatively small like this, the providers prefer them to be in smaller blocks because it's easier for their maintenance. If they're all pepper potted around, it puts their costs up in terms of maintenance and things like that, and managing them. So what we try to do is we have a maximum, I think we say maximum group of 15 across the big sites. And ideally, if we can get them broken up into like this, blocks of 6 around like sites of 100 or 200, but appreciate if we can, then we do. Yeah.
So if I could have a proposal.
Before we get to that, Chair, I'm just concerned on a couple of points. While this, I think you've recommended it goes delegated on reserved matters, there are some issues outstanding from, for instance, the design officer on policy issues. And also there is the question of the construction management plan wasn't on the original conditions for the outline planning permission. And I'm just wondering about the making sure that the 2 lots of conditions actually line up with what we now would seek as a minimum in terms of the county council requirements.
So, Chairman, what I didn't say, and thank you, Councillor Brown, for reminding me. In the addendum, there were some extra conditions that were from highways that were to be included on this one.
Oh, yeah, so construction management plan.
So, yeah, so the construction management plan is on there. Along with, and there's a number that weren't included at the outline, but they are now relevant. So
Thank you. That's
hopefully
fine.
better.
And the other one was the design officer's comments. In particular, if you look at the original presentation of the site at outline, they had trees all along the front. If you go back to that very first one, and now they're showing that one there. Loads of trees. Look at that, fantastic. And now we've got no trees. And I think the design officers picked that up. So I just question whether that can be dealt with under reserved matters, under delegation, to make sure that the design officer's comments are acknowledged.
I mean, there are trees, some trees planted along the frontage here. It's not been in this location, but we can, if there isn't one, we can certainly put a condition on in terms of the landscaping and a note in terms of additional planting towards the front.
Because also the design officer made a comment, no clear front boundary treatment proposed.
Sorry, no clear
front boundary treatment proposed. And he was asking that there should be some. So. Exactly. Exactly. Therefore, I think I'm just concerned that we're allowing the developer to.
We'll pick that up through conditions in terms of landscaping, including additional tree planting.
Excellent.
And details of the front boundary treatments.
Yep, and informative about sill. Thank you. That's all. Thanks, Chair.
Do I have a proposal from somebody, please? Seconded. Those in favour?
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Weren't here when I did mention that we were losing 4 very long-serving members of this committee, and how grateful I was for the contribution that you've all made. It'd be very greatly missed, that experience and expertise. I think our successors would do very well to emulate. So thank you very much indeed. Appeals, they're just the 2, I think, in the pipeline.
Two in, and then decisions that we had as well.
Yeah.
One decision which was in Langdon was for a tarmac driveway around the listed building. Or sorry, put that on a bit of a training point for discussion and for the training of new committee members. What I'd say at this point is, as I've already said, I think the inspector was critical of us in particular on two points. And why we got costs awarded against us was the fact that we had taken professional landscape advice, but then when refusing the application, we'd included landscape and not really provided any evidence or justification to back that up. And then the other one was this issue about impact on local infrastructure and NHS and things like that, and the inspector was quite clear, we're a sill charging authority. If you charge sill, that is there to mitigate the impacts of the development, and he considered that it was unreasonable for us to then refuse on those grounds. But I think it's probably one that I think will be useful for to open up to all members when after the elections, and use as a bit of a discussion point as well for training.
Ross is not happy. Is there no other route down which we can go, legal route? Because obviously the landscape there, I don't suppose the inspector has been there to look at the landscape. It was, did he? Well, he's blind. He's blind. Is there no other avenue down which we can go?
No, I don't know.
The quick answer is I had asked the legal officer and the monitoring officer, because I didn't realise technically, I think I've got this right, you can challenge an inspector's report, but the unanimous legal advice, having looked there, that we had zero chance of a successful challenge.
A lawyer would never say that, but we have very little chance. It's very unlikely that we would.
And that's the impact of both those developments upon the environment in Oakham is going to be making it incredibly difficult for people. We don't have the medical backup that we actually do. The road system down there is wrong, the drainage is wrong. And I'm actually flabbergasted that.
We have sill that would, I mean.
Madam, the amount that we get from sill would not do the work that would be required to alleviate getting over that level crossing.
I'll bring it in a second.
Sorry to get-
The fascinating thing, if you read that report, was that the inspector did not take the planner's view that the impact on both the doctor's surgery, where they were saying it was taught, and the schools, in particular, the travel thing was quite funny, but the doctor's surgery, he said very clearly, the fact that it was malfunctioning, well, he didn't use the word malfunction, but he's pretty close to it, was not relevant because there was capacity there. And the fact that it was being badly handled was not a planning issue. He then said on the schools thing that the places available were still, there were vacancies. And I mean, on the public transport, he said you can't have it both ways. They were complaining about the traffic congestion, but at the same time saying there wasn't enough public transport, and he pointed out that they were getting another 10%. I mean, you can argue that it's a nonsense, but he was putting a completely different interpretation.
Well, I'm going to say this, once the elections are over, maybe this council needs to consider doing what more and more councils are doing, which is sending to the government a fig on your housing plans, a fig on your targets. We're just not going to do them. And we're going to run the county for the people of the county, and central government can go swing.
Here, I stayed for the MRI thing. I just wanted to clarify, and actually this does speak to, I think, decisions maybe need to look at and legal assistance. I read that appeal report very carefully, not surprising having Cottesmore come up. And the one thing I thought was very telling was that he said there was no evidence listed, and evidence is the good point, because both on the Ketton, one Ketton and this Cottesmore, the difference is from the ICB, we did have evidence that there was no capacity, and the letter from the ICB is clear in that regard. And I would suggest, and knowing and having had discussions around, and I've shared discussions with Councillor Brown over our primary care estate. The problem isn't only associated with SIL money and can't just be rectified by SIL money, because it calls for much wider issues around shortages of GPs in the country and so on and so forth. And so I would suggest, as a planning authority, and as an authority, we might need a conversation about where that can go, because actually,
I was just going to say, we're having those discussions with them. There's a number of groups and meetings that are taking place with CCGs, not just Rutland's one, but also Lincolnshire across the county as well.
I'm party to a lot of those meetings and I attend them. But what I think is that we need to maybe have some more joined up thinking, moving forward. And obviously, once the election's out of the way and everything, I do think when we're discussing this appeal, certainly because it's a key point in this appeal, that actually we maybe come up with a strategy that can assist us, because we are going to have this problem. Certainly, there is a primary care state strategy coming from the ICB, and but that has been delayed. And until that has come through, until we sort out the issues around primary care in the east of the county, every planning that's passed is adding to capacity issues, because there is no capacity. And I think that's the key thing. We're going to have this come up for each one, and we need, I think, a way forward.
Chairman, I think it's simple. We have the money in SIL and Section 106 to support development of primary care in this county. The NHS, ICB have failed to deliver that capacity. We have the money. We've had the money for a long time. Sorry?
It's another case. And I know it's a big case of the primary care trust in Birmingham about 2 years ago. Is in the fact that it isn't always, if we're providing SIL, and I know it isn't that simple, but if you want, we are getting SIL and Section 106 limits. It's very hard to refuse an application based on the fact that primary care trusts start doing their due diligence and creating, even though there is that issue. I suppose the issue is that we need to go in and do whatever we can with the primary care.
I think
that
that's the point that I think Roger and his team are having these very discussions because of that, because they need to have that information in terms of developing our local plan, because they need to know what their care strategy is going forward, so that they know where the growth is going to go. So
Well,
there are lots of discussions.
It's chicken and egg, isn't it? Because with the falling of the local plan and the scattering of because let's face it, we had plans. There was a new surgery going at St George's Barracks, so we had plans. And that plan fell, those plans fell, and then because that's led to the scattergun planning. What I would say is I'm not speaking out of turn, because it was at the last Health and Wellbeing Board that actually the amount that's earmarked for health under our current SIL is earmarked for spending. So there won't be any SIL money left. If that is passed through, it comes to council, so I can't preempt that, but there was funding towards Oakham Medical Practice and that's earmarked. They've put in a Section 106 request that was talked about at Health and Wellbeing Board, and obviously the procedure suite and the improvements to Rutland Memorial Hospital, and that actually covers that amount of money. So there won't be, and I appreciate what you say, but actually as we all know, the SIL pot is finite, and once that health element is spent, it's spent. So I think what I'm trying to explain is we might have spent that within the next 2 years, and we're still going to have this issue.
But isn't the levelling up contribution towards the Rutland Memorial Hospital going to be over 1 million? I think 1.2 million that we've got to put in. So that will go out of SIL money. And
no, that's the 1.2 million that's going in kind of, what's the word for it? Help me out, Gordon. thank you, the
Correct.
contribution to the levelling up is actually going to services within Rutland Memorial. So they've put in.
Yes, but it's still coming out of SIL money.
Yes, that's the
what
that's
I'm-
the
the
so
point I
that's what
make.
I'm saying. That's
And
the
and the other point you say, you're putting money into
we're still working
Oakham Medical Practice. That is a privately owned company. It's not owned by the
As
ICB.
We-
If it's a
we-
privately owned company, which doctors are, they are owned, those practices are owned by their pension plans, they're owned sometimes by multinational companies, which they lease from. We're putting state money, our Rutland money, into a private individual's pension plan. There's got to be some reason that we have control over this.
well, we do have control, and that it's.
Sorry, members, we're still public and there's people listening. So I'm wondering, can you?
Nothing I'm saying wasn't discussed in the health and wellbeing. board. Yeah. But-
I thought we closed the meeting.
Not close the meeting.
Made for our beds. Right, so at 5 to 9. Answer the begging.
So,
Sorry.
Chairman, I don't have the enforcement update this time, but willing to take any points.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.